Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Erick Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1999 supernatural action-adventure comedy titled The Mummy. Now, The Mummy runs for 2 hours and 5 minutes long. It is directed by Sommers. It is produced by James Jacks and Sean Daniel. The script was written by Sommers. The story was written by Sommers, Lloyd Fonvier, and Kevin Jari. It was composed by Jerry Goldsmith, the cinematography by Adrian Biddle, and it was edited by Bob Duxey. And the stars of the movie are Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz, John Hannah, Arnold Vosloo, Kevin J. O'Connor, Jonathan Hyde, Oded Fehr, Erick Avari, Stephen Dunham, Corey Johnson, Tuke Watkins, Omid Djlalili, Aaron Ipale, Bernard Fox, and Patricia Velasquez. With a big budget on its shoulders, you may expect more from what you get paid for in the theater. More neon-colored laser effects. More dangerous missions in search of hidden treasure. More camels with bad breath. And so many dead people returning to the land of mortals, trying to bring us down. That's quite a heavy load I see there. So with an abundance of deceased corpses materializing through the vast deserts of ancient Egypt, The Mummy just seems like there are way too many restless spirits just wanting a piece of the action. I mean, a lot of it is exciting, and this is actually a really good movie. Some of the Walking Dead become militant as they await full command over which side to take. And should these walking corpses take down these aggressive explorers who dared to invade the ancient lost city of Hamunaptra, located under the desert sands of the Sahara Desert? Or should they just take their revenge on an ancient pharaoh by the name of Imhotep, played by Arnold Vosloo, a big bald-headed priest who back many centuries ago was persecuted, 3,000 years ago to be exact, for having an affair with the pharaoh's mistress. And then he ended up becoming buried alive, wrapped up in bandages, which is what they did. That was how traditional burying procedures went. It didn't just apply to the nobility or the church, but everyone who all deceased corpses were, wrapped up in these bandages, plastered. It was partially just so that they could keep the corpses fresh, and also because they also had a belief in reincarnation. And in order for the reincarnation procedure to be in full effect, corpses have to remain fresh. Well-known fact. Reincarnation can't come into full effect with a rotting corpse. So that's why they did this whole mummification initiative. Anyhow, as an added punishment, however, Imhotep, because he committed a sin by having sex with the pharaoh's wife, they buried him alive. They mummified him while he was still alive. They buried him alive, and they also dropped scarab beetles on him. And now, due to the carelessness of archaeologists who wanted to explore the lost city of I can't even pronounce the name, Hamunaptra, they actually literally opened up Pandora's box. And now Imhotep, he's back from the dead. And he is still looking for his deceased wife, Anksu-Namun, played by Patricia Velasquez. And he will kill just about anyone who tries to get in his way, without prejudice or without remorse. Yes. And the thing about Imhotep is that, at the beginning, he starts off as a rotting corpse, but then as time and time goes on, he starts to fully materialize to his old looks again. Even though he is a supernatural, super dangerous, super villainous, demonic entity who could materialize by showing his face in the sand. He can shift into other kinds of manifestations. And he also can bring the dead back to the land of the mortals. And it's up to our careless but somewhat resourceful heroes to bring them down. Imhotep makes the transformation from a hideous, decaying corpse to a handsome, Yul-Brynner-like warlord who can manifest into a swirling sandstorm, and he can also devour airplanes. He can also magically unleash a plague of locusts with his magic breath. Hey, why not? The Candyman can have bees. Imhotep can have, well, either locusts or scarab beetles. That's right. Now that's what I call wonderful, Okay, never mind that. Beetles, get it? Under the direction of Stephen Sommers, he took what was an old classic horror character from the golden age of movies and brought it back to life. Unlike what Francis Ford Coppola did with Bram Stoker's Dracula, or with what Kenneth Branagh did with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, by bringing these old classic horror films and making it into a newly revamped horror film. Well, I can't say newly because these are both relatively old movies, almost 30 years. Bram Stoker's Dracula is going to be celebrating its 30th year. And Kenneth Branagh's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein came out in 1995, so I don't know if I want to call them new, but they were new at the time, relatively. But they still stuck to the traditions of making Dracula into a horror drama with a bit of romance and seduction, because Bram Stoker's Dracula has that. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is also a horror film that also has great effects of dramatic with some kind of dramatic intentions to it as well. So they still kept the traditional horror film perspectives of the Dracula and the Frankenstein story. But what Sommers did was something much more different. He decided that instead of making this movie into a horror drama like the Frankenstein and the Dracula movie, he took the route by adding some of the horror lore from the Mummy stories and made it into an action-adventure film in the same veins as Indiana Jones. It felt more closer to an Indiana Jones movie, rather, or perhaps the facsimile of Indiana Jones. Well, in the same veins as Indiana Jones, with the swashbuckling action, solving riddles, narrowly escaping death, battling villains, battling dead corpses, taking down bad guys, fighting against corruption and greed from people who are out to look for treasure or for some other priceless, valuable relics that could make you rich, but also or they're all a curse. Personally, if I was to go into a pyramid, I wouldn't touch a thing. I will not take any chances of touching anything. First of all, that's disrespect, that's trespassing, and thirdly, whatever belonged to the dead, leave it that way. Do not touch anything. But one of the principal similarities this Mummy movie has in comparison to the old 1932 Boris Karloff film was that Imhotep believes that an English girl is the reincarnation of his long-lost lover. In the 1999 version of The Mummy, Imhotep has his sights set on the British book-smart librarian named Evelyn Carnahan, played by Rachel Weisz. And what a coincidence. Evelyn Carnahan, I believe, is actually the same name as the explorer. Well, his wife, it's the same name as the wife of the man who first discovered Tutankhamun's corpse. I believe his last name too was Carnahan. And his wife. Anyways, she is fascinated about the lost city of Hamunaptra. So she joins forces along with her bumbling archaeologist brother Jonathan, played by John Hannah, and a thrill seeker named Rick O'Connell, played by Brendan Fraser, who knows where he's buried after dueling with them during his years with the French Foreign Legion. And I gotta say, this movie really was good because the acting was great. And I'm gonna tell you something, they had beautiful characters. Also, you know, we see a juxtaposition between old school visual effects along with some levels of CGI, not overkill CGI, not brain exploding CGI like you would see in the movie Van Helsing, but just the right amount of touches of authentic visual effects and some CGI. That doesn't, like, blow it up. I gotta say here, Brendan Fraser is exhibiting his inner Harrison Ford, along with his witty one-liners and his unpredictable sense of escaping dangerous predicaments and his ability to fight off all the baddies that charge at him. But one of the big differences between Rick O'Connell and Indiana Jones is that Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones takes himself a bit too seriously when playing Indiana Jones, and his one-liners are more subtle in delivery. That's because, Harrison Ford, he's this really dedicated guy to his craft, no matter what role he plays. Whether it be Indiana Jones, whether it be Han Solo, or whatever acting role he has done in his almost 50 years as an actor. He is really that grounded in and focused. And I gotta give him hats off for that. But Brendan Fraser, he knows that this is surreal, and his witty quips and banter is played through with a more comical effect. Brendan Fraser is known for his more comical type ways. And while this movie, I will not say rests on the laurels of being satirical, it's not. It is played more, it is kind of what you would be more like a poor person's version of Indiana Jones. But then again, Indiana Jones is, pretty much a legend in the Hollywood industry. But The Mummy does try its best, and it is still very effective in its delivery. This version of The Mummy unapologetically looks and feels like a theme park come to life. Almost as though Raiders of the Lost Ark was being demoted to a more cartoonish background with goofy characters, tongue-in-cheek humor, and outstanding, albeit surreal, special effects. There are, of course, the stereotypes in there, but they're more played for like a good effect. And it's not like too ham-fisted and rammed down our throats. It's not, like satirical in any sense. But it's more like a good time rather than, the more dedicated gung-ho type of movie that Indiana Jones possesses. At least Raiders of the Lost Ark. I can't say the same about Temple of Doom. Last Crusade was really good. And I don't have much to say about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Though never short on excitement, it intentionally never takes itself too seriously and shows no apologies about it. But it is still inferior to Raiders of the Lost Ark due to being not necessarily satirical in its delivery, but close to it. And it's mostly because Brendan Fraser is more like a comic actor than he is as, a more serious, focus-minded guy like Harrison Ford. The satirical approach may open the doors to imaginations that bears no boundaries. The weakness is that the thrills have a more spoof-like effect rather than the more intense feel to it. And even though Imhotep is one scary son of a bitch, and yeah, he is paying homage to the Golden Age movie monsters, like in the same veins as the Draculas and the Frankensteins, and the Boris Karloff mummy, with a much more appeal to more modern fans. He really is not entirely as scary. He's more played for an action-adventure type scary villain as opposed to a more horror film-like one. If there's really actually anything that kind of makes your skin crawl, it would have to be those scarab beetles. I mean, these little fuckers are very, very lethal and dangerous. And if they get stuck to your body, well, I hate to say this, but you are really totally fucked. Never mind you, these buggers have been enjoying eating the flesh off of Imhotep for 3,000 years. What makes you think they're gonna stop now at going after mortals? And when they get on you, there's no chance in hell they're going to get off. If you go to close range with these carnivorous insects, they'll have no problem feasting on your flesh as well. And don't say I didn't warn you. So of all the things that are horrifying about the mummy, it isn't really Imhotep. Although he is quite a fascinating piece of nature, his resurrected wife, Anck-su-namun, or the Walking Dead, it's these creepy crawling scarabs. I mean, just the thought of them makes my bones itchy. And though I highly recommend this movie very much, it's still inferior to Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it's still very fun to watch. Never a dull moment. It's great that Sommers took a classic movie monster and recreated the creature into a genre outside the traditional horror film into something more fascinating. That's what I love. I like it when people try to take a more daring, different approach instead of just resting on the same traditions. Nothing personal against Francis Ford Coppola with his Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's still a great classic horror film. And nothing against Kenneth Branagh for doing Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Definitely has more of a tragic feel to it than it did like a horror film back in the early 30s when it was directed by James Whale, and I think Boris Karloff was also in there as well. Yeah, long before Vincent Price, it was Boris Karloff that was the king of horror. Okay, yes, too. Bela Lugosi and Lon Chaney too also had some gumption in their horror integrities as well. But at least it's good that they took something old and made it into something original and more refreshing. The performers definitely make it light, but maybe the weakness is they made it a little too light in its intentions. But it's still something that's worth 2 hours of our time. And I gotta give recommendations for this movie. I do truly highly recommend this movie very well. And I guess that's all there is I gotta say about this movie. So yeah, if you ever wish to ever see the movie The Mummy, I'm sure it'll appear on Netflix sometime in the future. It's good to watch all year long. Doesn't necessarily have to be around Halloween. It could be any time because it's not a scary horror film per se. It's more closer to action adventure, kind of blockbuster type of things. So if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give The Mummy a 7 out of 10. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules: be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Erick Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.